Even though the average person spends 8 hours a day working, they're actually only productive for So when I found 2 of the laws in the 4-hour work week, I knew there had to be more. So I started looking at like different physicians, philosophers, and I found some of the top laws that there are that actually helps us with our efficiency and being productive. Everything I'm explaining, I also put in a PDF if you rather read it, and it's in the link below. My name is Betty, and I make videos on productivity and travel. So if that's what you're into and you want to achieve your goals, make sure to follow and subscribe. The first is Parkinson's law, which is that work expands to fill its completion time. What does that mean? That means that if you have a task that you delegated 2 hours to it, you are going to take the full 2 hours, even though you could have completed it in 1. So we end up taking all of the time that's given to us, 1, because we can, and 2, because that's how long we think it takes to complete a task by. Now, if we know this to be true, how can we use it in our favor? Here's some of the ways that I found were really interesting. 1 is measuring. First, you need to be setting appropriate expectations for how long you think something's gonna get done. Because if you've never measured it, you're really going in blind. You have no idea how long it usually takes. So it's hard for you to cut back on the time when you don't know what the average time even is. And if you don't have a time allocated for this task, you could really be spending all of the time in the world because you're never gonna reach a limit where you're like, oh, I'm spending too much time on this. You think you can spend as much time as you need to until the deadline comes. And you're most likely not gonna be worrying about how much time you spent on it, you're gonna be worrying about the fact that it's not done yet. We end up confusing busyness with effectiveness. You can end up spending 6 or 2 hours on the same project and get the same amount done. And this is because one is busy work filled with distractions, while the other one is clear and focused work. And next, we shorten the deadline of the tasks. So if something is due next week, you get it done within the next 2 days. Why? Because next week we might be extremely busy, but we're not thinking about that. We're just thinking about the fact that we're able to put it off a little bit longer. But if you get it done within these first 2 days, you put that artificial stress on yourself that you usually have when this deadline gets closer. That way you get it done quicker and you still have time to review and go over it if needed. So you've shortened the deadline, now what? Reduce the amount of hours you set for a task. Now, all of this at first can be a little overwhelming, like I'm going to make this deadline quicker, I'm gonna reduce the amount of hours, why would I do that? But it helps you actually stay on track and be effective with your work. That is unfocused, we could actually be spending quality time with our friends, going out, doing something that's fun. But instead, we're spending the same amount of time doing this task. Why? So we can feel busy, so we can feel good about ourselves. So if it normally takes you 4 hours to get it done, ask yourself, how can I get it done in 2 hours or even 1? Because you're going to end up stimulating your creativity and finding out that there are multiple ways to get to the same direction. So let's say you're planning an itinerary for an upcoming trip and that usually takes you like 4 hours to research a city and find out the top attractions. Instead of doing it all yourself and putting that work in, why not get AI to do it for you and then just review what it's already done? Now, AI is an easy cop-out for that example, but with different things, you can ask your friends for advice, you can find out more effective systems, anything to help you reduce the amount of time but still get to the same goal. So usually at first we're a little reluctant to this idea, but if you think back on assignments and things you've had to do for work and school where you've had a short deadline and you're like, how the heck am I supposed to get this done within this amount of time? And you've done it. And that's because when we are put up to the wall like that, we perform because we are dialed in. So that's what we're trying to achieve, but artificially. We are creating that for ourselves, so we're able to get that same kick in. A great way I like to use Parkinson's law is by having my environment work for me. Now recently I have been loving going to Starbucks to work. Why? Because when you buy something, they give you a code on the receipt for the Wi-Fi and that's only available for 2 hours. Which means whatever task I came in to do, I have to complete within those 2 hours. I'm not gonna go up and wait in line and do this whole process, buy something that I don't need to stay an extra 10, 20, 30, 40 minutes. So when I look at my clock and it says, oh, I only have 1 hour left, I only have half an hour, I am focused because I'm like, okay, it almost becomes like a game. I'm like, I need to finish this before my Wi-Fi is up. And when it cuts off, I'm like, oof, okay. And can I go get another 2 hours? Absolutely. But when I go up to get another 2 hours of Wi-Fi, I like to have a different task to complete. And this really helps me monitor how long I'm spending on something because now I consider them sessions. Like, is this gonna take me 1 session or is this gonna take me half a session, 2 sessions? But it's all organized and it helps induce this urgency. The second one you've probably heard before, it's called the Pareto principle, but it's best known as the 80-20 rule. If you haven't heard it, it's basically a law that states that 80% of your results comes from 20% of your efforts. Now, this is done in multiple ways. It can be that 80% of your income usually comes from 20% of your clients, 80% of your happiness comes from 20% of your friends, so on and so forth. But here's the top 5 ways to use this to hack your productivity. First is something we're all trying to get better at, which is time management. Now, if we spend a few hours in the beginning of the week, either Sunday or Monday, planning out our meals, assignments, hangouts, goals, gym sessions, everything that we need into our schedule, it can save us an enormous amount of time, because during the week, we're not going in blind, and you know when things come up, when you can allocate time for them. Next is the endless to-do list. I am so guilty of writing down like everything that I can think of to put on my to-do list and then wonder why I haven't gotten them all done. But instead of trying to complete 80% of the things on your list and getting burnt out, focus on the 20% that are the most important to you. What do I truly need to get done today? And if I could do that one thing, those 3 things, that will help me move along so much further than if I end up staying paralyzed and not moving at all. Doing this ensures that things don't pile up and you actually address them as they come. Next is distractions. So I know life is crazy. There is a lot going on all the time. Everything wants our attention. But when it comes to distractions, there is usually 20%. There's a little 20% group that is taking up 80% of our time in distractions. And I think you and I both know what it is, but I will come out here and call you out for it because I'm calling me out as well, which is number 1, you already know, our phones. So when you are getting something done, if you can put your phone on do not disturb, airplane mode, shut that thing off, put it in a different room, you are able now to flow because your phone is your map, your clock, your messaging, your internet, it's everything. So the amount of ways that it can distract you is endless. If you have anything to look up or text, end up writing a note for it and do all of that once you're done with whatever task that you're working on. Instead of trying to stop everything around us, if we start looking at the top things that are distracting us the most and try and reduce or cut those out, that will give us all of that attention back. This is an interesting one, which is problem solving. I didn't think that the 80-20 rule could be applied here, but it can. So if you start writing down all of the different problems that you have, this can be work, life, anything, and now you bring it one level deeper and start uncovering like why this might be happening. Is this a communication issue? Were you forgetful? Did you not see things pop up? Is it an organizational thing? If you start boiling down all of your problems, you're gonna see that a lot of them have common themes. And if you are able to work on that, on what the root actually is, instead of focusing on all of these problems up top as they're coming, you're just trying to like hammer them down, you're able to not only solve these issues, but all of the future issues that are going to arise inevitably because of what's already happening. And of course, decluttering. When you're in an environment that feels good, you're able to have a clear head and think better. Now we end up using the same 20% of items and things in our house or in our car, our office space, yet we can't bring ourselves to throw the other 80% of things away. We're like, I might need that in a few months, even though I haven't worn that in years. So start decluttering your space and going through things and asking yourself, do I really need this or not? And only keeping the essentials. Now the third law, I can't even pronounce. I don't know if it's like Ilch's law, I don't know. It's a law of diminishing returns. It's actually an economic theory. Basically, after you've reached the optimal level of capacity, any additional gains is going to be smaller increases in outcome. So is 1 hour always worth 1 hour? Maybe not, because there is 1 hour when you are at peak performance that you are going to get the amount done than you would in 3 hours if you weren't on your A game. Do not overpack your schedule. And this is because we do not have the same amount of energy throughout the entire day. So when we create this to-do list, we think we're gonna have the same fire and passion from the moment we wake up to the moment we go to bed, and that's not the way our body works. Your energy fluctuates. You have breaks, you have dips. So if you're going to plan out your day, have a mix of high-level activities and low-level activities to counterbalance. That way you can get a major task completed that really sucks a lot out of you, but then in between that, you can get some smaller tasks done. We are all unique, so we all have different times in the day where we are most productive. For some people, it's in the morning, other people, it's in the afternoon, and some people are just straight up night owls. So knowing when you're able to get the most amount done, you're able to put your high energy task for that time and have your schedule work around it. Check in with yourself periodically. Let's say you spent a day or an afternoon all working towards one task. Check in every hour or every half an hour, put an alarm on your phone, because a lot of times you might be dozing off, thinking about something else. And if you're not getting quality work done, maybe it's best for you to go on a break. A lot of the things that I'm saying here, it might seem like I'm trying to be like, you need to be the most productive ever and this and that, but it's like, if you are going to spend that time not being productive, you could be watching a Netflix show, hanging out with your friends. So if you are not going to be productive, you might as well have that time for yourself. This is time that we are just robbing ourselves of because we're not doing one thing and we're not doing the other. We are fooling ourselves into thinking that we're advancing when we're not. So check in with yourself to see where you actually are, because if you're not feeling it anymore, if your energy is not there, it's best to redirect. Don't feel guilty for saying, you know what, I don't have the energy to complete this task today. I'm going to get a good night's sleep and tomorrow I am going to kill it. Because remember, you're not trying to win a prize for who spends the most amount of hours on this task, grinding and working hard. You are trying to work based on results. Don't try to be a perfectionist. I know when we're really deep into something, we want to obsess over the little details, but that actually stops us from progressing. If you have an X amount of hours dedicated to this task in that day, just work on getting it done. Once you get it done, you can work on phase 2 of that task, which is checking to see if everything is correct and fine. But right now, you just want to make sure you get it out. Get into the habit of just getting things done instead of getting stuck. Also, when we try and obsess over little things, we end up getting so stuck on it in our minds, we're not able to see it very clearly. So it's good to be able to step away from it and check back into it later once we've already finished it. And of course, with this, you're gonna want to take care of your body. This law will really work against you if you are not prioritizing your health. I'm sure you've seen it. If you don't get a good night's sleep or you haven't eaten anything all day, your body will let you know by your lack of energy. You are going to feel sluggish and it's going to take you so much longer to get something done. So you end up getting into this little rut where you don't feel good physically and you also don't feel good mentally or emotionally because you know you didn't perform at your best. And that's not even to be productive. That is for your overall life in every single area. 4 is Carlson's law, which states that interrupted work will always be less effective and take more time than if you were to do it in a continuous manner. Okay, so you're gonna be shocked by the statistic. People work on average 8 hours a day, right? So how much of that time do you think that they are actually spending working? Less. Whatever you just said right now, less. 3, what are we doing with the rest of this time? We are scrolling, texting, talking to our coworkers, snacking. We're doing a whole lot of things, but we're not staying focused. So no, you don't need more time. You need focused energy. And these laws are how you get there. And you might think, oh, well, it's okay if I'm slacking off working on someone else's dream for my boss, right? But what happens when it's your dream? What happens when it starts getting personal? Because whatever habits you are creating at your work, a lot of times you're not gonna be able to just turn that off and on when it comes to what you actually wanna do. And if you've trained your brain that interruptions are okay and welcomed, then you're gonna have a hard time reeling that back in when it comes to matters that you truly care about. I know we've already mentioned this before, but I can't help but say, put your phone away. Anything that is able to just go like boop and get you out of focus, and that can be TV as well. Anything that really can come into your environment out of nowhere should be avoided. After your phone, one of the top things that distracts us is actually just other people. So isolating yourself can be huge to avoid these disruptions. Our loved ones mean no harm, but when they're chatting away for 20 minutes here, 20 minutes there, it takes you out of the zone, especially if you're working from home. So try to isolate yourself or let people know that you're about to engage in some deep work and that you can't be disturbed. We love our loved ones, but we're gonna have a lot more time to give them when we complete our task in a shorter amount of time. So that's what you have to think of. Sometimes our environment pulls us in all sorts of different directions, especially if we're working from home. We can have the laundry to do, the dishes, we get a little snacky and we go to the kitchen. There's a lot to grab our attention, and all of that adds up. And the danger with that is that we can end up taking twice as long to complete the same task. So you think you're multitasking, but in reality, you're just wasting time. You can set up some deep work by time blocking. When you've allocated a certain amount of time in your week to complete a task, you get to focus on just that. Instead of working on the same task for 1 hour 3 times a week, work on that same one task for 3 hours 1 time a week. Whenever we have to switch from task to task, we're using different parts of our brain, engaging in different skills, but when we're completing the same task for a longer amount of time, we are activating the same parts of our brain and we're able to flow a lot smoother. Another way to do this is by batching. So if you have a lot of similar tasks, instead of getting them done all on different days, put them together. Group those tasks in so you can do them all in the same time block to avoid distractions. Time, focus, and energy are some of the biggest factors that end up determining what you accomplish in your life. If you start to notice the role they play in your day and make these small adjustments to account for them in your life, it can go a long way. As someone who has self-diagnosed myself with ADHD, I wondered for a long time why I feel so ambitious and motivated, but sometimes struggle to get simple things done. But when you start to understand yourself, where you work best, what systems work best for you, you're able to now change your day according to that. From batching to creating your schedule, these laws were all made so you can figure out what works best for you. Test them out and let me know which ones you think were the most effective. Again, my PDF is down below if you want to download it so you're able to read through everything, and make sure to subscribe if you want more productivity hacks, learning about traveling and becoming the best version of yourself. Thank you so much, and I will see you next week.